Hey guys, this is Gina Versa. We are doing a episode of TV Hangouts to brighten your days in these turbulent times. We're doing the CBS streaming show Star Trek Picard, which launched last month, or actually 2 months ago at the end of January, and it's been on for a few episodes, and we're kind of doing a recap episode to talk about the first 4 episodes of the series. And joining me today is a friend of the show. I believe he's listened to a few. Nathan McWherter. How are you, good sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Just just kind of just relaxing and quarantine. Was it just staying inside?
Yeah.
On this rainy day. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy out there. If it's not the rain that'll get you, it's something else.
Yeah. But Nathan, tell us a little about yourself. How have you been doing these days?
I'm good. I'm a writer. I guess if I'm just introducing myself, I'm a sci-fi writer. I would say by hobby at this point, with an office job. So. When you hit me up to do this, I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan. So
You're a Trekker?
I am. It's fun. Oh, it's funny that you say Trekker because I hear so many people who hate the whole Trekkie thing, but I've always thought of myself as a Trekkie. I don't get people who I get that it gets kind of thrown around as like a negative thing. I've never felt like it was negative or anything that I wanted to shy away from or anything like that. And I see people online sometimes who are like, yeah, all Trekkies, and other people get really mad about even using that word. So I think of myself as a Trekkie before a Trekker.
Okay. I just wanted to be safe.
Yeah. No, and I'm sure there are some people listening who are probably thinking like, yeah, it's Trekker, it's not Trekkie. Yeah. Trekkie's offensive. Between the two, I mean, honestly, as an English lit major too, I like the sound of the word Trekkie better than Trek.
It's nice, right?
Yeah. Trekker is just so hard and But anyway, yeah, so writer with an office job, continually inspired by Star Trek. So
yeah, and we've been on a few podcasts before. I think we were on back in the day the it was the Dr. Odyssey podcast.
Dr. Odyssey, yeah, and we did a couple of Marvel ones, I think, for Civil War.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
fun times.
Yeah, so
that was like 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years for sure.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
But Nathan, can you tell us a little bit about, you said you're a longtime fan. Just what's your history with Star Trek? Do you have any first memories of the show?
Yeah, it's really funny that you say that. So my dad is a huge sci-fi fan. My dad is a huge Star Trek fan. And my folks were really big into Next Generation. So it's perfect that we're talking about Picard and that this is coming back. And Next Generation started in, I think, 87 or so, and I was born in 89. Maybe it was 80. It started in 88. Somebody out there is upset with me right now. So I grew up actually with it being in the background. My parents were always watching it when I was growing up. My mom has, and my wife was just telling me today, nobody's going to believe this story when you tell it, but my mom has this story of me being 2 years old and knowing the intro to Star Trek Next Generation.
Nice.
The whole Picard saying, these are the Voyage of the Starship Enterprise, that whole thing at 2 years old, I knew by heart and would just kind of recite along with it. I would say a lot of my early memories are definitely when I watch some, kind of reruns of any Next Generation, I definitely there is a lot of nostalgia and a lot of it that I remember kind of as a little kid. My dad had plenty of action figures of the entire Enterprise crew and the Enterprise itself, and so I have a lot of memories of playing with those when I was really young. From the Borg, like just little action figures, action figures of like the Borg, Ferengi, Picard, Troy, the Data, also some just different background characters that sometimes I'll just be watching an episode and be like, oh, I had that guy as an action figure. That's so weird because he's in one episode, but for some reason we had it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's better than like I don't know, like Star Wars. They have like characters for like literally everyone back in the day.
Yeah. And so you're right. It is really different because Star Wars does a lot of that, and there isn't as much kind of Star Trek that is as popular or as marketable, any of that. So it is kind of funny that when I was growing up, I had more Star Trek toys than I had Star Wars toys.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of my memories of the show, and I guess my history with the show for sure.
Nice. Yeah. Myself, I was always, I started with the original series on the G4 network.
Yeah.
If anyone remembers that, R.I.P.
Yep.
But, I just started watching kind of these reruns, and they would have like little graphics, kind of like they would do like, oh, does this red shirt die? Or do you see like Kirk's shirt torn, kind of counting?
I think it was like a little like multiple choice in between.
No, it was just like almost like commentary. It was like a 2.0 sort of thing, Yeah.
Would it like pop up at the bottom of the screen during the episode?
Yeah, there was to the right side. Yeah.
Oh, how funny! That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So you started with original series then?
Yeah, the original series. And that kind of leads into, I guess, the next question. Like, favorite. They were always, original series. I just find like a little more interesting. Kind of not interesting in terms of just how they're in, but just to me, just the archetypes and it jives with me and my tastes and sensibilities. But we're always at. I guess this always is a question. Favorite captain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it should fairly make sense from everything I just said, but definitely Picard. Absolutely. And it's funny because I was just about to ask you if you were Kirk then, if you were.
Yeah, I am Kirk because I was telling people like I like Picard. Picard's great. I'm not shit talking Picard, but like I think Kirk gets a bad reputation where he's being thought of as reckless, but I don't think he is. And Picard, Picard is very calculated, but Kirk makes calculated risks.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely agree with that. I think that in the realm of people who maybe are in the Picard camp or anything like that, they can kind of have a bad rep toward Kirk maybe for that. And, one of the things I do love about Picard is the, what's the best way to say it? Just that he's just classy. Like, I mean, he's just sophisticated. He's just very well knowledgeable, very cultural. He's always reading a book. He's got that great line about all a man needs is to just kind of sit by himself alone with a good book, which of course is great. But it's funny you saying that about Kirk and how he's, calculated risks and stuff. But Janeway in Voyager has a great line about Kirk and about him being a, out on, kind of the open frontier, like, kind of in the Old West, that it was a different sort of world that, they were living in at that time versus the more cushy, posh kind of, the Enterprise D definitely has a way different feel than Picard or than Kirk's Enterprise. And there's a good reason for a lot of that, it was in a different world. Yeah. Different galaxy. So yeah, he definitely doesn't deserve the bad rap that he gets from certain people. I agree.
Oh yeah, no, of course. And do you so you identify a lot with the Next Generation bridge crew. What do you like about them? Like, what do
I like about them? What don't I like about them? I mean, like everything from, just obviously any sort of everything kind of trickles down. So Picard, just kind of comes at everything from this really great diplomatic, as you're saying, kind of calculated way, and, from a lot of culture. And then definitely what I actually love a lot is I love Riker's sort of balanced juxtaposition between the two of them a lot of ways. Riker, a lot of times to me, and in a lot of, definitely in the early seasons, always reminds me of Kirk. He kind of has Kirk's sort of more calculated risk and willing to kind of take a risk and step outside of what, Picard's very, what Picard kind of thinks, so that their balance is always great. And then, I mean, everybody from Data and Worf are just two really great characters in general, as two people who come from, kind of in the same vein of Spock, of course, is Data and Worf, coming from, partly something that is human and earthbound, but has, something that they're carrying with them, whether, you consider it to be a chip on their shoulder or baggage, or just a different perspective. Data obviously aspiring to be human and being made by humans. Everything about his story, Worf having been raised by humans, but being Klingon and aspiring to be more Klingon than he is. Like, I love their stories. I love those individual stories. They're really fascinating.
Myself, I guess I just love the bridge crew for the original series. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are just so iconic. I love their dichotomy and just the way they play off each other. Spock, I think, is probably my favorite character.
Oh, yeah.
Just, that scene in Wrath of Khan always gets me. It makes me cry a little bit.
Yeah.
Seeing him go, even though he's going to be back, it's still so great.
Yeah. No, you can't help but be heartbroken. You can't help but be touched by all of that. Yeah. But McCoy and Spock they're just great together.
Yeah.
Always have been. Yeah.
I guess just going right into it. So this launch the launch was really surprising in the first episode called Remembrance for Picard. It's really surprising in it picks up the pieces from Star Trek Nemesis, which is like the most hated of the films. It's like up there with like Final Frontier. People do not like that movie at all. And also Star Trek 09 by J.J. Abrams, which everyone is universally loved. It's certainly one of Abrams' better films.
Yeah.
Especially after Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you kind of saying that, because I was thinking about how this did come from sort of those two properties, from Nemesis and from Star Trek 09, but I was thinking of it from the sense of like, Star Trek 09 that not many people kind of like. So I was kind of thinking of it from a little bit different, that the seeds of this do come from two things that I feel aren't. I mean, 09 is probably more mixed feelings rather than just kind of, the negativity that, of course, comes from or is in Final Frontier, or, the negative reaction to Nemesis. But I feel like there are little seeds that came from Nemesis and Star Trek 09 that, there was a good foundation to build off of.
Yeah, because, I mean, it deals with like the destruction of, Romulus and just kind of the death of Data, which were two monumental events that happened for the Next Generation universe,
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember when 09 came out, and I remember a lot of people just being like, "Oh, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe they did that." And I remember somebody saying, nobody's really talking about the fact that all of that happened in the Kelvin timeline, but what they actually did in the Prime timeline is they destroyed Romulus. Like, that's way bigger than any sort of like, I can't believe that you X, Y, and Z, in the Kelvin. Like, that doesn't matter as much as the effect that movie had in the Prime timeline.
Because for Star Trek 09, seeing Romulus, I mean, the Klingons are kind of like the, I guess like the USSR. What were the Romulans? What were they an allegory for? I'm not, what would you say?
I mean, it's funny because I think of, I mean, I still kind of think of them as being a little along the lines of the USSR, but I do feel like there is little bits of, of a variety of other sort of countries, whether it be, places like Korea or Germany, definitely, like different aspects of different parts in our time. The Romulans have always, and in this, they definitely it comes up frequently with Narek, not to kind of get ahead of just this first episode, but in terms of like secrets. And so there's a lot within the USSR and with the KGB and stuff that is very secret driven, and that is, kind of a main part of the culture. Same thing with like North Korea, obviously, or like the SS in Germany, that, those are, I would say, all, very strong ties to the Tal Shiar and to the Romulans and, other things that we're about to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
But, are there any other ones that you can kind of think of that you feel the Romulans also kind of tie to historically?
I guess kind of North Korea for sure. Yeah, I would kind of go with that. Because, for Star Trek, and we'll get into just kind of, it's always it deals with a lot of real world allegories, even though, the Star Trek universe is supposed to kind of be this utopian society. In some ways, they don't have currency, and, they've went past that, but then in other ways, they still kind of have a lot of conflict. Because, I was kind of going to this theme of, the fact that Starfleet, as you see in this prologue to everything, kind of becomes their ideals become a bit compromised, because they really dropped the ball in helping Romulus out, because we find out later the synthetics kind of going crazy, and that's against these Starfleet ideals, where in was it Undiscovered Country, when the Klingons have their thing, they didn't immediately help them.
And I really like that you mentioned that, because that's probably one of my favorite Star Trek movies.
Oh, it's great. Everyone should definitely watch that after this.
Oh, absolutely. If you haven't seen Undiscovered Country, you definitely need to. There's so many. Christopher Plummer in that does such a great job.
Always putting sphere.
It's literally what I was just thinking, is that entire dinner scene, and when he just yells, "We need breathing room," and just all the different references, and
what does he say? Like, I'm like a northern star, or what does he say?
Something like that. Yeah.
Great work from Christopher Plummer for sure.
Yeah, it's great. There definitely is, with the destruction that happens in that movie, there is kind of them reaching out to Kronos and to the Klingons and helping them here. And then we have kind of almost a parallel situation in this. And there's, Picard, who's, basically feeling as if there isn't anything to kind of, feeling like almost like, frustrated with the situation, with kind of how he's having to, and it kind of comes up in the I feel like the next episode, they didn't get as much into it in Remembrance, but his own frustrations with the way that they responded. And I think it's so kind of poignant and strong when he just has his like kind of outburst there during the interview, and it's just like, it's not Starfleet anymore. Like, I'm getting chills just thinking about that line again, because
some great acting from Sir Patrick Stewart.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just saw actually somebody asked the showrunner, Michael Chabon, great novelist, Michael Chabon, asked him like, what was the inspiration, and he was just saying like, oh, Patrick Stewart. He was the inspiration for writing so much of this, because he asked us, challenge me in my acting. And I think that definitely, was what they did, and it's the whole reason why he got into it.
It's an amazing scene, and it's it's crazy that Starfleet just really loses its way.
And obviously that's something that kind of ties, as we're kind of talking, in a lot of real world applications and stuff like that, in terms of sort of how things connect, kind of allegorically and stuff like that. I don't know. If you want to kind of touch on kind of how some of that ties back into, sort of our real world now, and, especially things that were happening, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, you could compare it to like, the Trump administration, with like Puerto Rico, a lot of aid to that, the Providence, just, it wasn't helpful. And, when someone's throwing friggin' toilet paper at people, it's certainly not either.
Yeah.
And
the whole thing, I think of the refugee crisis kind of throughout. in Saudi Arabia, and just a lot of the just a lot of the issues kind of throughout history that we've kind of seen regarding refugees and people getting help when they need it ultimately, and without any sort of I don't know what the word is or anything.
Yeah.
Without the promise of getting something in return.
Yeah, like aid or something,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's just it's just crazy to kind of see that this is that kind of chapter for Starfleet. And one of the things that's interesting, they don't really talk about any of it, but one of the things that I've seen a couple of people mention online, but I think is really true. And I had a buddy say that Picard is for, people who know Star Trek pretty well. Discovery is something that, anybody who casually watches can just jump into, but that Picard is something you kind of need to know a little bit. You need to dive into, and come from knowledge. But one of the things that they don't really talk about in the show, but one of the things I think is a big factor in Starfleet's response is definitely that they just got out of a war. Yeah. The Dominion War from DS9, from Deep Space Nine, kind of obviously took a really big toll on Starfleet and took a really big toll on the galaxy, and is part of their hesitancy. Would you agree? Is that something that you were kind of thinking as well?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I would say so. Yeah. Yeah, it's war, takes a lot of their resources, but but still, the Federation is, this idealist society. It's right. It's still crazy that they just turned their back to it.
Yeah, and it's funny too, and this is I don't know if you want to. I'm pretty sure it was in the next episode in Maps and Legends. I don't know if you want to kind of dive into that, but in Picard's conversation with that admiral. Which I'm blanking on what her name was, but there's this kind of classic archetype, I guess, in Star Trek of what they call a badmiral, a bad admiral, and she kind of just immediately fits the bill. I mean, she's not in the classic sense that she's kind of secretly conspiring with something. She just, it's nothing that we've seen that she's involved in anything negative, but just in the sense of her own frustrations with him and just kind of getting mad at him. There has always been, I feel, in Starfleet, these individuals who aren't as utopian as we all sort of hope.
Yeah, exactly. Nathan, just kind of changing gears here. What did you think of seeing Data again after all these years, and also finding out he's a father?
I mean, Data's always been definitely a favorite of mine, and the entire thing of sort of revealing that Daj is Data's daughter, or at least that's the information we've been presented with, kind of so far and stuff. It's great. I love the opening kind of scene of that first episode, of seeing Picard and Data playing poker, which is just so classic Next Generation. Being in 10 Forward, and especially the shot of just seeing the Enterprise D again. Especially spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen all of the movies and stuff, especially after it was destroyed, and just kind of being able to experience all of that again. It's definitely very nostalgic, and it's just coming home.
yeah, exactly.
But it's also it's funny that you say that, of him being a father, because I think he previously was a father. There's the episode in Next Generation, Offspring, where he does create kind of his first daughter, or his first offspring that he allows to kind of choose their gender and that. So do you remember that? You remember that episode?
No, I don't actually.
Oh yeah, it's a really great one. It's so funny. I have a list, a buddy of mine and I made a list of like all the episodes that we felt were kind of pertinent to watching Picard, and it started with like 10 episodes, and by the end of it it's like 27 episodes or something like that. And so but yeah, there's this great episode where he just decides that he wants to be a father, and he creates another android, using schematics of his positronic brain and all of that. And he, basically, it's just sort of about that and about what happens to her and all of that. Her name was Lal. It's a really great episode if anybody hasn't watched it.
We should, if you haven't checked it out, as I haven't, unfortunately, we'll do a viewing party after.
Yeah. So The Offspring, for anybody who's not going to be at Gene and mine viewing party. On Netflix, watch The Offspring. But yeah, I really liked seeing, kind of the legacy of Data, kind of as we're saying, he got such a abrupt sort of ending in Star Trek Nemesis, and kind of a weird ending with the whole B4 and kind of transferring, his memory. He was like gone, but is he supposed to not be gone? And then by the time we kind of see him, when Picard and Jurati open up that drawer and you see the parts of B4, it's like, okay, so it didn't really work. So there's a lot of kind of weirdness around Data's death.
And I was going to also say that the way the Next Generation crew kind of ended was also, it ends on such a tragic, sad,
Yeah, it does. And it's funny that you say that, because because it does end on like these very tragic notes with, everybody's going their separate ways, of course, as many things end. Data just died. But there is also like some interesting positivity in. I recently rewatched Nemesis, and there's but there are still some like good parts. And one of the things I thought was interesting is that there is sort of this moment where they basically they're kind of fighting off the Picard clone and his gosh, I forget what they're called. They're from Remus, but those Romulans that are with them.
The Remans?
Yeah, I guess they are just Remans. But the other Romulans, kind of join in the fight there. And they kind of tell Picard at one point, like, you'll always have a friend on Romulus now. Like, there becomes kind of almost a foreshadowing to Remembrance and to the whole refugee and Picard going out there, and that he's already kind of bridged this gap between the Federation, Picard, and the Romulans. So I always thought that was really interesting upon kind of watching it again. So there's a little bit of hope in sort of the tragedy that's Nemesis.
And then, just moving along here, we had episode 2, which goes more into the synthetic ban. We see the incident that was it happens on First Contact Day, if anyone doesn't know, which is like April, god damn it.
Oh.
I know it's April 5th, and we learned that from one of the best Star Trek films, Star Trek First Contact.
Yep.
And
also a great movie if nobody's seen it and is watching Picard without having seen it, definitely should.
Yes, yeah.
Definitely.
And this is kind of like a terrorist attack, essentially. I mean, for the Star Trek universe, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and sort of unique, and it leads to this synthetics ban, which is really interesting and also feels very kind of un-Starfleet and anti Federation. And it's funny, there's a lot of the whole synthetics and synths and stuff that reminds me, I think, of something that I know we both love, which is Blade Runner.
Yes,
just in terms of kind of the place of synthetics, kind of in society and kind of this lower class part of that. Is that anything that you had kind of thought of?
Yeah, no, not that I thought of, but having you tell me that right now, I could totally see a lot of parallels and the prejudice against synthetics that we saw in like 2049 and the original Blade Runner, especially.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree. It is really weird kind of seeing Starfleet and even in this episode. I think it's in Maps and Legends when they do the flashback, right, to Mars, and you see the guy or the one synthetic who does it, but just some of the things that the other workers, the human workers there, are kind of saying that is, like you're saying, very prejudiced and very much against these synths and not valuing them at all. It's kind of jarring to see, these Federation people kind of talking that way or kind of not being just very positive and all of that. You kind of see that the Enterprise crew that we've always followed, whether it be in TOS or in TNG or, that isn't that is all of the galaxy or all of the Federation. There are other parts to it. Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about the Tel Shiar, which was from the Next Generation. How was it like seeing kind of that plotline again?
I think it's awesome. I always liked so I always loved the Romulans and the Tel Shiar, and there's some really great episodes as well throughout TNG with them. Enemy, Defector, those are two other really great episodes. Have you seen either of those ones?
I can't recall.
Defector is this great episode where one of the Romulan well, at first I think you think he's a lieutenant commander, but he defects, and the Enterprise crew is having to try to figure out if it's legitimate or not. So it's cool. It's definitely cool to see them. I feel like we don't, throughout TNG, there was always so much more that we could have done with the Romulans and with the Tal Shiar and all of that. I don't know, and this is the thing that I do want to ask you. I don't know how I feel about the whole Zat Vash thing. With God,
I forget his name. His teenage bodyguard.
No, with the whole idea that of the of kind of the secret cabal within the Tal Shiar that's actually running the whole thing. Is it the Zat Vash or the Vash?
Yeah. That was very interesting. Yeah, very interesting plotline.
Yeah, it just seemed interesting to me why we would need kind of a secret cabal that was running the whole Tal Shiar rather than just it be the Tal Shiar, because I'm interested to see if there's more kind of explanation for some of that, because it kind of feels like doing a Cold War movie and saying, oh, well, we're against the KGB, but there's a secret KGB inside the KGB.
Yeah, it's like a Michael Scott sort of story.
Yeah. a little just kind of Russian dolls within Russian dolls kind of thing that I don't know if it's just a story choice or where that comes from, but that's the one thing that I just with the Tal Shiar that I was like, are we just saying it's the Tal Shiar, or are we just calling it something else, or sort of where are we at? But it kind of seems like you didn't really get that from it. It didn't really.
No, I mean, apologies to any listeners, but yeah, I mean, just don't. Some of the Next Generation I'm not as familiar with. I have, tried to do as much research as I can, but yeah.
Well, that's why I'm here, so we can be a balance.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
To TNG, because I'm sure your knowledge of a lot of old TOS stuff is better than mine.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
But yeah, I mean, this Maps and Legends, it's a great episode. As I said before, the showrunner for this is Michael Chabon. Maps and Legends is one of his books, so I loved kind of that callback to just him and his novels and stuff. It's a collection of his writings. It's really great, but yeah, there's also a lot of other kind of really cool callbacks in this. The whole Vasquez Rocks. Kind of going back to that.
Yeah, that was great to see. If anyone doesn't know, the Vasquez Rocks are a California sort of landmark where they filmed the original Gorn fight with Kirk and the Gorn.
Yep. But it's also something in which you're obviously a much bigger, kind of film buff. It's I had heard Vasquez Rocks is kind of big in a lot of things, right? It's kind of been used in a lot of film history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they filmed a lot of stuff in there. Yeah. But I love the little Gorn fight though. 'Cause it's just like so like I mean, I love the original series, and they've always had their moments of the budget, but yeah, it's that fight is something else.
Yeah, well, I mean, that entire thing is just like a classic. It's a classic fight scene. It's a classic episode, and again, that's something else that if people they're listening to this and they haven't seen, I can't think of the name of that episode, but any of that, it's definitely something you got to go back and watch. But this episode's also cool because it introduces I think one of the most interesting characters in this new series, Rafi. I think Rafi.
Yeah, I love Rafi. Yeah.
Yeah. She's very different than a lot of Star Trek. I mean, we've been talking about how some of this is different than what we usually see for Star Trek and the Federation, but she's a little bit different too, because they hint at it a little bit in this episode, but you see it a little bit more, as the episodes go, that she, kind of is carrying. I mean, I said a chip on your shoulder earlier, but she definitely does. She has some baggage and some things that she's, kind of struggling with, and some complexity to her that, a lot of other characters in TNG and TOS, they didn't have sort of the darker side that, she seems to be struggling with,
Yeah, exactly.
Alcoholism seems to be, one of her struggles.
Yeah. And, any thoughts on, before we move on, two things. Thoughts on we talked about the prejudice for synthetics. I haven't, has there ever been sort of any, prejudice really in the Star Trek universe? I can't think of.
I mean, I feel like the whole prejudice for synthetics kind of, and that theme in this episode and definitely in kind of this series, it stems from, there are two episodes that I think of. One is the episode Measure of a Man, which is when Bruce Maddox, who is the guy that they're looking for in this whole series, basically wants to basically tear Data apart, take Data apart piece by piece, and is trying to make a case that Data isn't actually a sentient being, that he's just a machine like a computer, and that he shouldn't have the right to decide what he does. And so there is a little bit of, that begins, I would say, in Next Generation, this kind of prejudice towards synthetics or toward, machines and kind of viewing them as something different, and not something that should have a free will. That's another thing that if nobody's seen Measure of a Man, that's definitely where you should start in all of this. The other one, and I don't remember the exact episode title, but there's another really great one where in TNG where there are these little robots that this company, or I can't remember exactly what it is, are that they're using them to kind of do the dirty work for them, and these little machines become and begin to show sentience and show that they are afraid. One of them won't go into a thing because it knows it's going to get destroyed if it goes in there. And it becomes this whole question, this whole thing where I think it might be the Terraforming episode, or that might be something else. Somebody out there is upset with me right now and is going to send you a lot of emails and say, what are you doing? But anyway, Data goes on this big, long, kind of campaign to basically say these small little machines, they're sentient. This is a new form of life. This is the whole purpose of the Enterprise and of Starfleet is to find these new forms of life, and these little machines are. And it's interesting how many times, I love Picard, but it's interesting how many times Picard has to kind of be reminded of certain things. And
he's getting up there, as I guess we'll talk about that.
But so there is that prejudice against synthetics. I mean, prejudice in Starfleet, I would say isn't really new. I mean, we mentioned Undiscovered Country, and there, Kirk throughout all of that is angry at the Klingons, for his son. He has his own prejudices against them. There's that great part where he where he early in the
Klingon
episode.
bastards.
Yeah. But he had also like recorded his captain's log and like kind of said some things about the Klingons, and they like play it back to him later when they put him on trial and stuff. So,
not a good look, Kirk. Not a good look.
I know.
But, yeah, and I guess just any last thoughts on that before we just move on to the next episode, Nathan?
The last one, just in terms of prejudice that popped in my head just now, is I remember Worf's prejudice against the Romulans, and there's like a episode where he can help out, where he can basically assist this Romulan to live, and he refuses to. So there's a lot of little pockets of prejudice and of people kind of still having their own self-interest, which I think we think of Star Trek and the Federation as like, oh, it's all utopia and everything's beautiful and light, but I think there have always been these little pockets of showing like, hey, people are still human. Things still mess up. People make mistakes.
Yeah.
But
and one last question for you. We see Picard's vineyard. What do you? What kind of? How would you rate his wine? What would the review be?
I'm sure his wine is delicious. I can't imagine Picard himself, Jean-Luc, or the Picard family for how long they've had the vineyard of it being terrible wine. It's got to be delicious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's kind of, I mean, obviously his vineyard is beautiful. The whole thing, it looks great. I'd love to go visit it and hang out there. I think it's interesting, Picard, like kind of retiring to the vineyard. It makes sense for his family history and all of that. And there's some good vineyard. There's a good vineyard episode where he goes to visit his brother who's there at that vineyard. Yeah. Episode Family. I think.
Yeah, that's a great one. It really
is.
Really breaks down some great acting from Sir Patrick Stewart. Just how he was dealing with being a Borg. Yeah.
Yep. It's great for that. Yeah, you definitely. Again, the listeners got to go watch Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2, and then watch Family right after that. Yeah. But it's also cool. That episode is cool for showing kind of this deeper complexity for Picard. In his family dynamic and stuff, and you don't really see some of the fighting that he has with his brother.
Yeah, because unfortunately the brother dies, right?
Yeah, he does. In Generations, just kind of like they just kind of mention it. It's sort of random in passing, which was a little interesting, but. But yeah, no, the vineyard looks great. I always thought Picard. I always hoped that Picard would retire and become an archaeologist, because throughout the series he always talks about how that was like one of his first loves, and that's what he always wanted to do. So when they had said that Picard there was going to be a series, I was hoping that he was going to be an archaeologist, and it was going to be like a 90-year-old Patrick Stewart doing Indiana Jones type stuff, traveling the galaxy, just like finding like old artifacts and stuff like that. Oh, artifact, full circle. We can go into some of that Borg stuff. But yeah, so anyway, episode 3.
Episode 3, which is called The Ending is the Beginning. We see Picard's resignation from Starfleet. After, you see how first couple episodes, a lot of tension between him and the organization. They won't let him get a ship. And that was a really powerful scene, because it's like, I don't know, what is like Kirk tells him too, you're kind of based, he tells him like, don't leave, in Star Trek Generations there's a good scene where he tells him don't leave being the captain, because that's where you can make the most difference. And that's what that's what kind of Spock tells him too in, I think, Wrath of Khan, where it's like, that's your first best destiny. And like, Picard was so disillusioned with Starfleet that, where he could make the most difference, he quits.
Yeah. And I think that just shows kind of how heartbroken he was from, kind of a couple of things, obviously Data. And he talks about that the death of Data just has such a weight on him. And then definitely I feel like he's heartbroken from Starfleet, because, he saw and again, I'm going to connect it all the way back to Nemesis and his, kind of interaction with the Romulans and them saying, hey, you always have a friend here, that when he sees that they're in trouble, he's like, we're going to help them. It's the right thing to do. Their lives, they're not Romulan lives. They're just lives.
Yeah.
And I think, just that not playing out and the Federation just, kind of giving up and being like, well, we can't do that anymore. We're not going to, that he's just heartbroken about these two things that he cared about so much, Starfleet and Data.
We kind of see Picard's crew coming together. I mean, this is like kind of a, because I believe it's this episode he mentions he doesn't want to bring back his old Next Generation crew like Worf and Geordi, because like he doesn't want to endanger them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has that great line from Picard's two, I don't know if you want to call them employees or two people who live there with him, the two Romulans, Laris and I think it's Jaban. The two of them are some of the coolest characters too, and this Laris is just awesome. But I think Jaban says to him like, "Oh, you need to find somebody who hates you." And I think it goes exactly what you're saying, that like, oh, I don't want to endanger other people, but I'll endanger Rafi. Rafi, I can. I mean, Jean-Luc, you kind of screwed her over a couple of times already. I want to do it one more time.
Well, gives her a bottle from his vineyard. I mean,
I guess that's supposed to make up for kind of turning away and resigning and leaving her, and then ruining her life.
I mean, I don't know. Sometimes Picard. Sometimes. Like, what do you think of this crew? I mean, obviously it's not the original Next Generation crew, but they're really interesting. I felt.
Yeah, I agree. It's not anything like our typical Star Trek crew at all, which is usually all Federation, all very hierarchy and polished and following orders and all of that. But like. Yeah, Rios is really cool. The captain is really
I love Rios. Rios is great. It's cool to see a Latino character in Star Trek.
It is. Yeah, it's awesome to see. Just such a really strong, complex Latino character, one who's a captain, and he's really great. The entire cast, I mean. In terms of the diversity throughout the cast. All of that is just awesome. But yeah, they're a little bit of a mix match crew. They remind me more of like Firefly type crew or like Guardians of the Galaxy, just a couple of criminals kind of thrown together rather than our typical Star Trek crew. That's got to be pretty weird. For you, I would say, with the original series, because I feel like a lot of them were very kind of polished and all of that, other than Kirk, I feel like Chekhov and a lot of those guys, they were very, I don't know. TOS always felt very, the crew there I don't feel like too many of the crew, what am I trying to say? I don't know what I'm saying.
No, it's all right. Yeah. And just kind of, with just a little crunch on time, what do you think of just the Soji's the Destroyer, which is the twin of Daj, who are both Data's daughters? What did you think of that? We haven't really mentioned her too much, but
so
character.
Yeah, the whole twin thing was also there with the whole Zot Vash was one of those things that I'm like, okay, how does this play out sort of thing? Because it almost, the twin thing almost felt like, oh, we're going to kill her off just to kind of make you go, oh my gosh, they killed her. That's it. And then bring in like, nope, but here's the soap opera twist. We have a twin.
God, was it from Beer Fest? I'm his brother Tank, or I'm Landfill's brother, and I taught him everything I know. So it's like you never lost him.
Yeah, exactly. Which almost goes back to the whole Nemesis thing again of like, we killed Data, but we put all of his memories into B4, so he didn't actually leave. So I'm interested to kind of see how that plays out, and if Girardi's whole thing of oh, well, you have to make two at a time sort of thing. If that, like how that plays out and if it kind of feels justified, really, I guess is what I'm saying. But no, I think Soji Dodge, I kind of think of them the same. I think she's really cool. I'm interested to see what the destroyer kind of means, what this kind of destruction is that she's supposed to bring about. That whole interrogation sort of part with her and that one Romulan with the cards or whatever they were was really cool and really interesting. And it was just a different sort of vibe and all of that. But I don't know. It's it'll be interesting to see kind of where that goes and what direction the story has. No,
definitely. And just wrapping up here, we're on the last episode, which is episode 4, Absolute Candor. We see 7 of 9. I'm not, I wasn't a big Deep Space Nine, I'll admit, fan, but how is that like seeing her back?
I think it's great seeing 7 of 9 back, and you don't see it as much in this episode as sort of the one after this, but she's definitely. I love Voyager. I love every series. Like, it's hard for me not to. And 7 of 9 is definitely one of the best characters, I would say, in Voyager. One of the most interesting, and just to kind of see her back is really great. It's and I think that there's a lot, unfortunately, that goes into the next episode that kind of hints at where she's been, what she's been going through. That's really cool and really interesting, and kind of makes sense for the character, in my opinion. I'm hoping to see a lot more of 7 of 9 for sure.
And you enjoy Elnor as well?
I do.
I love that guy.
I do like Elnor. Yeah, Elnor is really cool. I feel like we haven't gotten as much screen time with him as I would kind of hope for. I want to see a lot more Elnor. But the character and like his backstory and definitely his connection to Picard is really cool. And just, kind of that Picard's known him, since he was a little boy, and his training, kind of being this sort of, I don't really know if he would consider himself to be a Romulan assassin in the same way that, the Tal Shiar and Zat Vash kind of are Romulan assassins, but, kind of they call him a warrior nun because their whole sect is primarily women, or all women except for him. But no, he's really great too. And, I think Picard has some line of needing Elnor to be there because he's not a young man anymore. And so it's cool to see all of his swordplay and him protecting Picard in that last scene. Is really cool. And
it's great.
It's always good to see a good sword in Star Trek.
Yeah, right. I mean, and it was interesting that Picard didn't fight as well. I mean, he was kind of
I know. Yeah.
Great episode. We're a little short on time, unfortunately, Nathan. But any last thoughts to talk about this one? By Jonathan Frakes as well, directed.
Yeah. And Jonathan Frakes has just done so much great stuff for Star Trek, obviously, from in front of the camera to behind it. So I love that he's been able to do so much in this series as well. But no, last thoughts is just go out, watch more Star Trek for sure. Hit me up if you want an episode list of 27 episodes to help prep you for for Star Trek Picard. But no, just always watch more Star Trek and it's live long and prosper, obviously.
Definitely. And Nathan, where can people find you at social media wise?
If anybody wants to follow me at Ray Bradbury, definitely can. I hopefully will post again there soon. Please check out
be glad to check out your stuff. And you could follow me on Twitter, Instagram, G9892. You could follow the Waffle Press on Twitter at the Waffle Press and on Instagram at the Waffle Press Podcast. Please like, share, subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, and if you feel generous, donate to Patreon. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We've been professionally unprofessional. professional.